Today we'll have a Bible class for an Old Testament passage for a Resurrection Sunday for a sunrise service. The text that we have in our LCMS calendar is Job 19, chapter 19, verses 23 to 27. Before we'll go into the text, as usual, a couple general remarks about the book of Job. Probably if we think of the Bible, Revelation, Ezekiel, Daniel would have a most variety of interpretations. People differ on even the ways of approaching. While Book of Job would probably be most mysterious book. Just a few brave people would even dare to write a comment. And I think the reason is, when we talk about, let's say, Book of Revelation, depending how you treat it, it's either far away in almost unforeseeable future, something will go wrong and then everything will go right, and it is far away. Or you take Book of Revelation as a constant battle between good and evil, and somehow those who write commentaries or who read commentaries think of themselves on the good side and they are good warriors and so on and so forth. While Job is picking up the themes, let me put it this way, from the other side of the coin of a life of a person. Pain, struggle, death of not even the protagonist, but the death of people whom he loved, his kids first of all. It's probably even worse than his own death. So, and along with that is, depending how you treat it, it's either absence or presence, the questions of absence and presence of God in these circumstances. Where is God while Job is struggling? How come he made a bet with God, made a bet with Satan, and Job, at least in the book and in the Bible, we never hear that God let him know what really happened to him. So all of those questions make book very difficult for interpretation. Along with that, we have very many scholarly speaking isagogical questions. So the questions of authorship, the date, was it real story? Is it real story, or it is just a novel, kinda real life like, or completely out of basis in real life? So all of this kind of stuff. But we are not going to talk about those questions. This is not, our class is not presupposed for that. We will leave it to scholars, let them deal with that. We'll just deal with the basic things. And what I would like to share today is the importance of names in the book. So Job himself comes from Job himself. In Hebrew, it comes from a verb, as maybe, yes, not all, most of the Hebrew verbs are like 3 letters consonant. So it's Aleph, Yod, Beit. And it basically means to be a persecuted one. I mean, his name means to be a persecuted one. I mean, no wonder we have this in the book. And then we have 3 of his friends that show up in chapter 2, verse 11, I believe. Yes. In chapter 2, verse 11, we have Eliphaz. We'll do a different color. We'll have them blue. Eliphaz. We have Bildad. And we also have another friend who is Zophar. It's actually Zophar. Let me spell it different, not like we have it. Okay? And I will explain the reason. Okay, so Eliphaz, or Eliphaz, actually Faz, it's Z in the end. One of the most respected lexicon written by Gesenius treats it as to whom God is strength. But there is another possibility, there is another chance. If we take Eli as El, God, E, my, then Faz would be pure or purity. So my God is pure or my God is purity. It's kind of like if we'll go into the same Faz idea, we find in Psalm 19, the word of God is much more desirable than the gold, even much fine gold. This fine means, or refine, this purified gold. Okay, so this pure thing. No wonder he often talks about the mysterious character of God that is so far away, so pure, so distant from creation, and that's why he can punish whoever he pleases and however he pleases. Then we have a Bildad, another guy, and his name, the meaning is either the son of contention or contender. Okay, contender. My God is pure. Okay, and then Zophar. Why do we need ts sound? What happened is actually we in English translations inherited it from German translations where Z, letter Z, stands for Hebrew ts. So that's what it is. That's why when you read in the Bible, for example, we meet his name in chapter, I believe, for example, in chapter 20, and then most of English readers would say Zophar, the Naamathite, answered and said, blah, blah, blah. Okay? But it's not Z, it's Ts. That's why I wrote it with TS. So Zophar has a small mystery in his name, and the mystery is in two different places, or in one place in 2:11 when we meet him first time, we have a letter spelled one way, and then in his first speech in chapter 11, is that his first speech? Give me a second. Yes, in his first speech, and then in his second speech in chapter 20, we have it spelled a little bit different way. There is a letter omission, though it doesn't really change the sound, though it is interesting. So, the first way of spelling can be translated as impudent. Okay? Impudent. I'll probably have to write it down. The second way of spelling can be taken from another verb that means to dance in circles, okay, or to walk in circles, or to dance in circles. So maybe, okay, maybe that's the reason while two of his other friends do have a third chance for a speech, he doesn't. Maybe the second speech, basically he goes into full circuit of accusations and explanations that the wicked should and will suffer, and Job has nothing just to repent, so no more reasoning, and therefore there is nothing to say. maybe this is the reason why we have another character suddenly shows up, basically almost out of the blue. Was he present during the previous conversation, or he entered into the scene of the story in the middle of the plot? So we have another guy, and his name is Elihu, which means, again, El as God, my, who is actually he. So my God is he. And I believe in one of our classes we talked about he idea in the scripture, when sometimes God is hidden behind that he pronoun, okay, or he concept. One of the probably most prominent idea is, I mean, when it's used in book of Esther in chapter 6 verse 1, where it's, okay, as we all know, in the book of Esther there is no mentioning of God or name of God or anything of God. But in chapter 6 verse 1 it says that the king couldn't sleep because he took his sleep away. Okay, so who is that he? Okay, so did king himself took his sleep away because he had too much coffee and too much chocolate and, you know, too much on his heart and on his mind and so on and so forth? Or there is other he who actually controls the circumstances of any plot or any story. So this Elihu, in a sense, with a third speech replaces so far. But there is one more important thing that I would like to mention about name of Job himself. As you might know, the letters in Hebrew language also stand for numbers. And Job is spelled this way. We have Aleph, we have Vav, we have Yud, and then we have Vav. Okay, so let's erase this stuff. So we have Yud, we have Vav, and then we have Beit. So 4 letters. Aleph stands for 1, Yud stands for 10, Vav stands for 6, and Beit stands for 2. If we put it together, we'll have 19. It is important to know that the very important concept in Old Testament theology and in present Judaism is a concept of being high, not high in the sense of, unfortunately, we have to use it very carefully, especially in our Californian context. You know, when you say being high, people think of something else. But high means when you have a hat and Yud, hat is 8 and Yud is 10, so it's 18. And the concept of high means life, actually. So that's what it is, you know. 19 is 18 plus 1. So mathematically and linguistically / mathematically speaking, he has an idea in his name as new, or he will have renewed life. So the concept of resurrection is built into his name, actually. And with this in mind, let us go into the text. Our passage in chapter 19 is a response to second speech of Bildad. Okay? First of all, being a very crafty contender, as I said, okay, Bildad describes the life of a wicked man in the previous chapter, in chapter 18. He says, you know, how long will you hunt for words, and so on and so forth. So indeed, the life of the wicked is put out, and the flame of his fire does not shine, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, he really goes through line by line, passage by passage, and he explains how the life of a wicked person is so tremendously ruined. His strength is famished. The calamity is ready for his stumblings. It consumes the part of his skin. The firstborn of death consumes his limbs. He is torn from the tent in which he and so on and so forth. This is terrible. And Job, as a response, first of all, he starts with a personal note. The very beginning of chapter 19 starts like that. How long will you torment me and break me in pieces with words? Okay? It's very interesting that all answers, all, let's say, responses of Job are adequate to what he was accused with by his so-called friends. Okay? And here, the guy who is very, as I said, crafty with words, crafty with being a contender, Job's response is, your words are hurting me. And then he goes on and explains, yes, behold, I cry out violence, but I am not answered. And he explains in many words his terrible situation, that he, means God, walled me up my way so that I cannot pass, and he has set darkness upon my path, and he has stripped from me my glory, and taking the crown from my head, and so on and so forth. And he explains, yes, he is in disastrous situation, but this is not because he doesn't consider himself to be a wicked person. And again, he comes back to the very, very, very personal note, and that note is addressed back. Why do you, like God, pursue me? Why are you not satisfied with my flesh? And then, after addressing Bildad, he has, it looks like he reached his emotional peak. Okay? And that's where our passage starts. So, verse 23 and 24, we'll do it together. We'll just go verse by verse and explain a couple important things, and we'll see how it goes. Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. Oh, that with an iron pan and lead they were engraved in the rock forever. So, my words, the words of Job, and he wants three things with them. He wants them to be written, inscribed in the book, and be engraven in the rock with an iron pan and lead. Okay? It's kind of like an interesting development. Simply from being written, like personal note, written, inscribed in the book, and then you have even more, even better material for carrying on through, I guess, not only years, but centuries. Tablets of stone, okay, and engraven. It will stay everything. So he understands that whatever he says, it is so deep in him, it is so important for him, it is so overwhelming that he wanted to be remembered. So he wanted to be written in, inscribed in the book and then engraven in the rock. And there is one more important thing. In our Hebrew text, there are a few words that would describe the speech. One of them is Amar, and most of the sentences was and he said, or such and such. It would be Vayomer, and it's just a regular conversation. It's like a regular sayings. Okay. Then there is Davar, And that's kind of like a speech of presentation. That's why fifth book in the Bible that we know as Deuteronomy is actually called Dvarim, means the words, okay, or words of Moses and so on and so forth. And here, oh, that my words were written, the word here is milah, okay, so it's mili, my words. It's in the Bible, it is used only in the context of poetic speech. So even being in tough circumstances, Job, the way he thinks, the way he addresses his matters, the way he presents his points, is not a regular conversation. It is not a speech from the pulpit. It is a poetic form. That's the most beautiful, most interesting to discuss in later on. And that's why probably, few thousand years later, we still debating that and studying that. It's very interesting. And then, verse 25. The reason why he wants his words to be written, inscribed, and engraved is for, okay, and actually, in Hebrew, and I know that my Redeemer lives. Okay? So, first of all, the verb to know, yada, in Hebrew means not simply knowledge about something. It's not an abstract data science. It is knowing, most of all, and especially if we talk about the person, it is knowing somebody on a very intimate level. Probably one of the best and parade examples would be in Genesis chapter 4, after Adam and Eve were moved out of the garden. The very first sentence in chapter 4 is, now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. Okay, so this close relationship knowledge led to the fact that now we have a guy named Cain. Okay, so I don't think that this passage from Job has any connections with ritual sexual relationship. What it means is his relationship with his Redeemer, and we'll talk about Redeemer word just in a second, are so close. He knows for sure that even in the middle of this tough conversation, and we are in the middle, okay, we have 3 cycles of 3 speeches, almost 3 speeches. We do not have, as I said, we do not have a third speech for so far, but we have 3, so 3, 3, and 3. So in the second of the second block, so out of this possibly 9 speeches, the middle one, the 5th one, that's the response of Job. So in the middle, he is in the middle of this trouble. He is so sure of his Redeemer because he knows him so close. That's fascinating. And I know that my Redeemer lives. It actually uses this word high. So my Redeemer is high. He is alive. Okay, that's why I, and this numerical meaning is 18, and that's why Job with his 19 hopes for one more chance, one more rebirth, if you want to say. Okay, so the Redeemer in Hebrew is Goed. And it is actually technically, it's a technical judicial or legal term. It means relative. Most of the time it means relative who's supposed to buy out his poor relative either out of debt or slavery. Okay? That's the same word that Ruth uses toward Boaz when he asked her, what's going on in the middle of the night. You remember that story. In chapter 3 of Book of Ruth, we have this wonderful story. And in this story, give me a second. And So he asked her in the middle of the night, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wing over your servant, for you are a redeemer. You are Goel." Okay? So you are the one that should help. And then they figure out that she's actually Ruth. She's a ex-wife, not ex-wife. She's a widow of one of his relatives. So therefore, under the rules of levirate marriage, there are rules that he needs to be involved, but there is a closer relative, and if you want to reread the story, you're most welcome. So Book of Ruth. But here, so his Redeemer is high, his Redeemer is alive, and his alive Redeemer will help him to do what? Okay, second part of verse 22. At last, he will stand upon the dust, or dust of the earth. This word that we have here, he will arise at the dust, okay? And the dust should definitely remind us of Genesis 2:7. Okay, so the man was created out of the dust of the earth, and that's the same word which is used here. And he will arise. There is interesting, the verbs is kum, okay, so he will go up. He will stand up or ascend. Sometimes it is used, not very often, but mostly rise. Interestingly enough, in chapter 15, Eliphaz, in his second speech, uses the same verb to say that he will not be rich. Again, wicked person. He will not be rich, and his wealth will not endure. And that's one of the usage of the form. So his richness, his wealth will not endure. But Job, in a sense, answering both Bildad and Eliphaz, answers that he will endure. My Redeemer will endure. Therefore, I will survive and I will overcome. Then it's very interesting even further and further. After my skin has thus been destroyed, okay, and I in my flesh will see God. Okay, and that's very interesting. I in my flesh shall see God. The verb see here is unlike regular verbs to look at something, to see something, means to see something divine. So it's like I will see divine. Or I will look with the eyes opened by divine, and I will see God. I don't know. We just don't have a verb for that. And but again, remember in the very beginning, he says, "I just want that my words would be written, they would be inscribed in the book, and they would be engraved in the stone." And here we have a same threefold passage. I will see God. I shall see him for myself. That's even getting even closer, even more intense. And my eyes shall behold, and not the other. And then the last phrase in verse 27, my heart faints within me. Or being more literate, my inner part is finished. And I think the reason is not actually the bad one. Because it's a breathtaking moment to see God face to face. And we can enjoy this moment. We can expect an enjoyment of this moment because Messiah Yeshua overcame death and opened the door for eternal life. He brought us so close to Father that now, as Revelation tells us in chapter 7, and in by the end of the book, that God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. To wipe away somebody's tears, you have to be really close. And that's what we can expect. Stay blessed.